is so funny.
See you in it.
This meme is so funny.
It was a late child. Right, guys, so we're on the blaze. You're on the streeper. So we'll be picking up here, guys. And we're going in hard. And we're going in hard. Yeah, can't close the leg. Sorry, just
life began. And I came from a broken home. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old. My dad was an atheist. My mom was a non-practicing Catholic. So there was no God in my home. By the age of 14, I was going out to the bars. I got into self-harm because I felt like I was dead inside. And I just wanted signs that I was still alive. And by the time that I turned 15 years old, I was partying all night, drugging all night, and drinking at the bars. And I came home one night, and my stepdad was standing at the... First, he told me that I wasn't worth it. And before he almost pushed me down the steps, my mom said, he told my mom that she had to decide between me and between him. My mom made a decision that night that I had to leave. And so they put me on a one-way ticket from Santa Cruz, Bolivia, where we were living, to Maui, Hawaii. I hadn't seen my dad in 10 years. With my entire life in it and an electric guitar on my back, I showed up in Maui, Hawaii, looking for my dad, not knowing if I would recognize him. After about 6 hours sitting in the airport, my dad shows up, and I had black makeup around my eyes, and black on black. Working in the oil field, it dawned on me that this would also be my reality. And he said, well, my dad spent some time on the...
My name is Marty Jopson, killer of the do with what we will. It's a rhetorical question, young man. We will come to the answer at the end. But first of all, I have to acknowledge where I am standing, because here it starts, of the part of it all, science communication, and where some of the discoveries I'm going to be talking about actually took place in this very building. So, electricity. What can we know about electricity? Right, well, first of all, electricity is all around us. These lights up here, the only reason you can see my slides is because they're somewhere up there. I can't see it. It's a projector which is projecting onto the screen. The only reason you can hear me is because on my bottom I have a battery pack projecting up to Tom up there. And in fact, what I'm going to do is, it's just gone to that, okay? So that's now gone out into the ether through the power of electricity. It's disappeared off. So, where does electricity begin? What is the beginning of the story of electricity? The beginning of the story of electricity, Miletus, was an ancient Greek, an ancient. Thales of Miletus discovered something. He discovered that, people have probably got it in jewellery. There's probably some amber in this room as we speak, but he had a big lump of it, presumably, and he discovered that if you take a piece of amber and you rub it on a cat, something rather peculiar happens. Well, in fact, two things happen. The first thing that happens is the cat becomes considerably annoyed. Tracing the cat. More than that, the fur is attracted to the lump of amber. It's literally pulled towards the amber. And he thought this was very peculiar. And you have to wonder about Thales of Miletus. You really have to think, why did he do this? Because presumably, okay, so he found cats, I don't know. I worry about these things. Now, fortunately for us, we don't need amber or cats because, never work with animals and children is absolutely true. So instead of amber, we can use this. This is a piece of polypropylene pipe, 3/4 inch waste over, which actually turns out to be quite important. So what you do is you rub, and if I hold this close to my microphone, which is here, without getting my moustache, electricity, this rod, this polypropylene rod. Now, what Thales of Miletus had happening is that there are these things called electrons. They're in the walls, they're in the ceiling. Everything is full of subatomic. This polypropylene rod on the piece of fake fur is some of the electrons in the fake fur are transferred to the rod. They rub off, quite literally, they are pulled off the fake fur onto the rod. So they build up on the rod, okay? And they sit there because the rod is made of plastic, and plastic is a non-conductor. So they don't move, so they are static, which is why we call it static electricity. So now, if Thales of Miletus, and I've got here a piece of space blanket, mylar film, this, get it charged. Pop that down, discharge my hand, drop this, I can get it off my finger. Oh, nearly. I have to start that again. Bear with me. Oh, everything's falling off. Typical. Right, here we go. Once more with feeling. Pick that up, that's important for later. We'll try that again. So charge up. Put down, discharge, picked up, and this time what on earth is happening? So what's happening is that space blanket is actually made of a very thin sheet of aluminium coated onto plastic. And the plastic coating, this is irrelevant, but what's happening is when you drop it onto the metal. Now, because like charges repel, electrons really don't like each other, okay? They are pushed away from the rod. So it's pushed away because there's electrons on it. And I can drop it. And pick it up. And this piece to you. Now, Thales of Miletus most certainly would have done this. And it is traditional that if you applaud a demonstration, it's more likely to work. Ah, yes. It's almost as if I didn't have to ask. Oh. There. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, there we go. Oh. It's too breezy in here. I'll put that down. So, we have the beginnings of static electricity with Thales of Miletus. And the thing is, though, nothing really happens for not just decades, not just centuries, but millennia. For thousands of years, nothing happens really in the history of science as far as electricity is concerned. And I should point out that the reason it's called electricity is from the Greek for amber, which is elektros. It all comes together. So not much happens, possibly because of the cat thing, which was confusing. More likely because actually making static electricity, as you can see, you rub it, you get a little bit of static. But actually making a decent amount of static electricity turns out to be quite difficult. And it wasn't until a chap came along called Otto von Guericke, who's one of my heroes, but we won't go into him really. He comes along, he invents a machine to make static electricity. And it becomes very popular. And what develops out of this are these things called electrical soirees. So what we have here is a picture of an electrical soiree. And what you have on the right-hand side is you have the electrician. The electrician who has placed his hands upon what's known as a Hawksbee device, which was a slightly later development of the Otto von Guericke's static electricity machine. And it makes static electricity. And what it does is it rotates, okay, and you see there's a big wheel over here, and there's a man behind it cranking the wheel. You should note here that the electrician is not called Bob and has his trousers down here. This is a very genteel man. He's even got a sword, of all things, by the looks of it. Very posh, because electrical soirees were the entertainment of the well-to-do. They were the entertainment of the upper crust, okay? And this is because nobody really knew what to do with electricity. It was a bit of fun, and the upper crust were the only people who could afford electricians and who could afford, well, quite frankly, anything to do with having fun in those days. So they're all standing around. You can see the guys on the left-hand side there, that's the upper crust. They're saying, oh, very jolly do, and drinking cups of tea and maybe fine port wine or some experiments performed, and it was all the rage. So I wanted to show you some of the electrical soiree experiments, some of these early electricians' experiments. And to that end, I have brought my own static electricity generating machines. Now, I've got two, because I'm sort of greedy that way. This one here is called a Wimshurst machine. And there's a beautiful example out there in the foyer out there. You can have a look at that. That's a really lovely example. This one's design. And this came out in about, this was the middle of the 1800s, so this is 19th century. Wimshurst. This machine here, though, is the one that you're probably more familiar with. This is called a Van de Graaff generator, which was invented by Mr. Van de Graaff, not particularly surprising. In the 1920s, he was an American, and he built enormous Van de Graaff, and I'm quite scared. So, we have a static electricity generating machine. We build up static on here. The first and most obvious thing you can do with a static electricity generating machine is generate a lot of static and then make a big spark. I'm going to make a big spark, slightly better, and we'll see whether this is... I crackle. Oh, that was quite a big spark, but it wasn't a very juicy one. I'm going to stop there before I burn my motor out. Make sure you discharge. So, okay. We can make a big spark. We can make lots and lots of static electricity. And the way this machine works is basically, it's doing exactly the same as I was doing with this rod. All we're doing is, rather than rubbing like this, we're using a machine to rub, effectively, electrons off the bottom, carry them up, and build them up on the top. And they just pile up on this big dome. And the bigger your globe at the top, the more static you can make. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, those are serving bowls from IKEA. And in fact, that is the entire reason this show exists, because I went into IKEA and I saw them and I thought, oh, I know what I want to do with them. So I built this and then I thought, now what am I going to do with it? So yes, anyway. Right, we can make big sparks. Now, the next and obvious thing to do is to do what they're doing in this picture here. If you look at the picture here, she is being charged up by the electrician. The electrician is passing the charge from his hands. He's got one hand, and I think he's sort of passing it on to his amanuensis, who's sort of standing in the background, and then it's passed, and I can't quite tell what's going on. Basically, they're charging the woman up, which is, let's face it, one of the things they're interested in. What happens when you use this strange electricity? What happens when it encounters people? So, charging up a person. Now, the sparks we were getting off that, I reckon, are in the order of 300,000 volts. About 1/3 of a million volts off this machine. About that big. Just about right. So I can charge two problems. One of them is if you have a pacemaker, it's very bad. And the second one is, but the trouble is most people know whether they have a pacemaker or not. It's not something that you sort of don't know about. You tend to know about pacemakers. And there is another problem though, and this is that there is a heart condition that is a contraindication for taking a very large belt of static electricity, okay? And I'm not sure how, it's about 1 in 200 to 1 in 300 of the population. It is also completely harmless, I should point out, but it is a contraindication for doing this. I have had a 5-point ECG test to look for this, and I do not have this. So I'm safe-ish. As far as in the broader sense of the word safe. So I can charge my... now, I think we know what's going to happen because you've probably seen it. And it may come as a surprise that despite having quite a significant amount of hair, my hair is the wrong sort of hair for this. Your hair, madam, would be just fine. No, we won't go there. So instead, I've brought my own hair. So I'm going to... it's fine. It's not silly at all. I'm going to stand on this by placing my hand on here. And then, oops, a bit far away, get a bit closer. Is that good? That's good, yeah. And we'll see what happens. Are you ready? And the problem is, what are your clothes are starting to do weird things. So what I'm going to do, and I just sort of have to stand here for a little while, like that. And gradually, I lose the electricity comes off me, the static dissipates. You can see all the hairs on my arms. If you're close enough, you can see they're all standing vertically like this. And I can lose this now, thankfully. This is one of my favourites, and this is one that they did, although they didn't do it on this scale. So, pie dishes. Discharge. Right, so they go on there, like that. Now, the reason my hair stands on end is the same reason, or stood on end, is the same reason that the little floaty thing floats in the air. It's because it's all the same charge. It's all negative charges all over me, all over my hair. So the strands of hair become coated in negative charges. They push away from the other strands, and that lifts them into the air. In the same way that these... Now the big ones, come on. One more. Hey, 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 yep. 2, 1, yeah! Can you two give me a hand and pick these up? Excellent. That's what I like to see. Putting youth to work. There we go. Brilliant. Thank you. Pick them all up for me. So yeah, so the pie dishes become charged with negative charge. They become very electrically charged. 300,000 volts to the air. Brilliant. A round of applause for my volunteers. They have just about done. Oh, look at that. Genius. Oh, and one more there. I did this morning. They just scrunched them. It was a mess. Right, excellent. So, everything we've done so far is about, they're all experiments where things have become charged with the same charge. But you can go a bit, you can do something a bit different for that. Now, there was one electricians. There was a guy called Stephen Gray, who became quite a popular electrician in the 18th century. Now, Stephen Gray was an interesting chap. He actually was an orphan. It's quite an interesting story. A pauper, and he went to one of the orphanages in the centre of London, which will... he taught himself science, and he taught himself electrical experimental science and stuff, and he became an electrician, like this gentleman here, and he raised himself up. He climbed the greasy pole of social climbing, so to speak, and through science and the art and science of electricity, and the art of demonstrating and the science of electricity. And one of his experiments that he was particularly well known for was this one. This is what is known as the flying boy experiment. Now, what he used to do is he would go back to his alma mater, whose name I have remembered, his Charterhouse, and he would borrow a poor orphan, the electrical soiree. And then what they would do is they would suspend the orphan, no really, they would suspend the orphan from a plank attached to silken ropes. You can see them, silken ropes, insulating ropes. And then they would charge the poor orphan boy up. And you can see Gray's hand coming in at the side, charging the orphan up. So the boy would become charged up. Now the thing is, he will become charged up with, say, negative charge. So lots of electrons on him, so he's minus. And everything else, relatively speaking, plus. Positive. And like charges attract. So what would happen? I thought, we should be doing this in this talk. Now, it's a couple of problems with orphan boys these days because they don't do that anymore. So we can't do that. So I thought to myself, what can we possibly put feathers on? What is the only sensible thing to stick feathers to? And the answer is clearly a rubber chicken. So this is my rubber chicken, and it's called Stretch. Say hello to Stretch, everybody. Yes, now you're talking to a rubber chicken. Good. Excellent. So what we're going to do with Stretch is we are going to charge him end. I'm going to use the second of... This is slightly different to this machine. This machine builds up negative, slightly complicated to explain, in fact completely impossible to explain, but you get these big fat juicy Van de Graaffs are notorious for not working when you need them to, and anybody dry them out because they're very susceptible to humidity. These machines, Wimshurst, are a much better bet. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach Stretch to one end of this device here. So first I need to give Stretch a conductive coat, which always worries him slightly. So we take Stretch. Yes, we're doing the experiment again. And then what we do is we suspend Stretch from the special feather replacement device. And then we make sure we've discharged. Take these off like so. We attach that to there. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach Stretch to the negative end here, or is it the positive? Not quite sure. It all depends slightly on fate and the day of the week, something like that. So Stretch here will become negatively charged. At the opposite end here, I'm going to attach myself, it's only fair, to a bucket of feathers here, and this kind of pointy whiskey thing, technical term that. And what will happen, we hope, is when I stand on stool, so I'm going to charge up the feathers with positive charge. Stretch is negatively charged, and just like the flying boy experiment, what will happen is the feathers should leap across and stick to Stretch, unplucking the chicken. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the most stupid thing you are ever going to see in this lecture theatre, and it pains me to have to do it here, because it is a noble and august place. So, are you ready, Stretch? No, probably not. Am I ready? Yes. Are you ready, ladies and gentlemen? Here we go. Everything wired up correctly? Yes. Turn on. Right. I'm charging up here. We charge up the feathers, and they start to leap. Nearly. Ha. Come on. They're going away from him. That's what's to happen. Stretch, feathers sticking to the chicken, and the chicken has been sort of ish unplucked. And once again, I've trashed the place. Hold on, I'll come around here and turn this off. I'm going to discharge the system, and you'll see that a lot of the feathers will fall off because they really are sticking there because of electricity. Yeah, and I get a little... So, flying boy experiment, or unplucking the chicken, call it what you will. And we'll put him back over here. Now, so the electricians of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, and the big question is this: if I was about to give you a big electric shock, which electric shock would you rather have? Would you rather have an electric shock of 300,000 volts and a tiny current amps of just 1 amp? So, hands up if you want 300,000 volts. Okay, and hands up if you... Either way. And hands up if you really don't want to show, please don't do it. Yes. Yeah. Indeed. Right. Okay, if you said 240 volts, stand up. Stand up all the 240 volt people. There's got to be some more of you, some more at the back. We all saw who it was. Yes, stand up, madam, you dead. I'm sorry, but that will kill you. Okay, here we go. Right, everybody, put your hands around the bottom of your chairs like this. We've wired it all up. Are you ready? On the count of 3. But if I could, I would. Oh, man alive, I would. Circuit. But that's another stuff. That's what you've got to remember. Current that kills, volts that jolt. A single amp of current doesn't finger in the mains, don't have a handle on. What we're going to do, I need a bunch of volunteer as well. Yes? Shall we get all 4 of you as well? Do you want to volunteer? You don't need to come down. With chance for volunteers later. Right, you lot come down here. I want you right at the end there. And then the rest of you form a line and take a step forward, sir. And then take a step to that side. And then form a line, because there's quite a lot. Important, you're the person whose name I am going to remember. So Max, I'm going to put that is, I have some little glowy in the dark ball thingies. Ooh, that one's flashing. This one's green today and this one's red. And can we bring the lights down a squeak, please? And what we're going to do is I'm going to pass these down the line, okay? Now you guys, and when this electron flows down the wire, we are passing a current. Are you ready? Get in the queue, get in the line. That's it, nice straight line. Here we go. Here comes the electrons. This is the current that flows down this wire, electrons down the wire. Are you ready for more electrons? Here they come. And that was on. And that one on there. We're passing. Not worry about that. Hands together or whatever it is, you get friction, your hands get hot. That's the problem with current. This is why current kills you. It's the heat that it generates. There are a couple of other issues. So what is voltage then? Right, voltage. So far, I'm going to up in the air, up like this, and pass it way up in the air like that. A little bit more. This is where it gets exciting. And do I dare go the next way? Yes, okay, hop. It's hopping. And we're passing the same amount of current. This one's gone off. But we are doing, oops, a lot. Okay. The voltage is the amount of work you do as the current flows down the wire. Max, you're not hopping. Right, round of applause for my volunteers. There you go. Thank you. Well done. Here, let me take that one off you. So, current is the number of electrons. Is that still on? Can't tell. It is now. And voltage is the amount of work you have to do to get the electrons down the wire, which is why it doesn't really matter how much work you have to do. So that this machine produces 300,000 volts, and all that really means is that it's got enough centimeters, okay? Because every centimeter in air is about 15,000 volts in dry air. It's probably a bit less here, actually. So this machine is probably running at about 200,000 because it's quite humid. We're starting to get a handle on all of this electrical science going on at this time. But the big question that remained unanswered was, what is lightning then? Because lightning looks awfully lot like a spark, doesn't it? When you make a spark in machine, it looks like a kind of a miniature lightning bolt. And the big question was, is it the same? It was this guy, Benjamin Franklin. We come across Benjamin Franklin. We know who Benjamin Franklin is. Yes, yes, maybe not. Benjamin Franklin is one of the founding fathers of it, and he is a scientist. And in 1750, he suggested this experiment to answer the question of, is lightning the same as static electricity? Are they the same? And what he suggested they did is he suggested that you fly a kite into a thunderstorm. And the kite's line will become wet from the rain, so it will become conductive. And then lightning will strike the kite, and lightning will pass down the wire, and you will get electricity. Lightning and electricity, which is a good thing, because it's incredibly dangerous. A man called in May of 1752 performed this experiment just outside Paris. And just outside Paris, what he did was run into the air, And he had some wine bottles. Here's this illustration from afterwards, shows a sort of a lightning. He started to get sparks coming off the metal rod to his knuckle. As he presented his knuckle, he got sparks coming off. You always do it to your knuckle because you've got less nerves, so it doesn't hurt so much. So he said, that's it, right, proof positive, lightning, electricity, the same thing. And that was all the proof we needed. Lightning did not strike. And in fact, they repeated this experiment. Somebody tried to Riechmann, who was a German, you can tell, in St. Petersburg the year later, in 1753, did this, and lightning did strike the metal rod, and he died because he was standing at the bottom of the metal rod, and the lightning went through him, which is fatal if you get struck directly by lightning like that. So, but they proved that lightning was electricity. So, but that does. I need a volunteer. I need a volunteer who has no shame. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Young lady, yes, you're in the middle. Do you have any shame? No. Good, come on up. We will discover. Right, you come down. Right, no, only joking. What's your name?
Kayla.
Kayla, right, stand there, face the audience that way. Kayla, what we're going to do is a little role play here for us. Imagine you've gone for a walk. You've gone for a nice long walk. You're out in the countryside, huge open fields. Maybe you're in Lincolnshire, something like that, big fields, okay? Nothing for as far as you can see. And you think, it's lovely, it's great here. And then suddenly, a thunderstorm rolls in. It's like in the films, you know, and it comes in, and lightning begins to strike in the middle, and behind you, and in front of you, and the side. Kayla, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, Kayla, you are, it's Kayla, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm very bad at names. You are a very intelligent young lady, I can see that. So you brought with you an umbrella, because, you know, that seems like a good idea, isn't it? So you put the umbrella up, don't you? Yeah, just humour me. You put the umbrella up, which we know is a bad idea. But why is it a bad idea? Surely this is shilling. These are rhetorical questions. Don't put your hands up. All of my questions are rhetorical. Why is it a bad idea, Kayla? This is the reason it's a bad idea. Right, lightning has to jump from kilometres up, 1,000 volts in dry air, a lot less in wet air. It's raining, it'll be wet. So that distance, which is about a metre, we're looking at maybe what's that? 500,000 volts or something like that. Okay, that's a big voltage. That's a lot of energy we need to push the current through. So if the lightning can go down this metal rod, and that will take no voltage because it's a really good conductor, it's going to do that. So it jumps. Rather than striking here, it will go bzzz, and it will strike here. It will go down the metal. You're actually a pretty good conductor as well, it turns out, because you're full of liquid. So it will go up your arm, through your heart, stop your heart, down, through, out the bottom of your leg. Big, horrible burns, you're dead. The casualty rate here is high. Don't go anywhere, we're not finished. Because, okay, let's try another scenario. Let's imagine that there is a single solitary tree. Yeah, you're looking dubious? But there's a single solitary tree in this huge Lincolnshire field. It's a wobbly tree, which possibly needs a little work, this prop. But anyway, imagine this is a tree, and there's a tree. So what do? You run, you hide, you shelter under the tree. No? It will protect you from lightning. Shelter under the tree for me. Hold the tree in the middle, because it's a bit wobbly. It does genuinely protect you from lightning, because the thing is, if you stand under something very tall, it will protect everything. What you do is you draw a line, 2 lines from the top down, and if you are inside that triangle, you will not be struck by lightning, because the lightning will preferentially strike the taller thing. So the lightning will strike the tree, and not you. So you won't be struck by lightning. Unfortunately, a lightning strike has approximately 30,000 amps. So all that current flows through the trunk of the tree, and the trunk of the tree is full of liquid. And all of that current, all of those electrons, just like in my wire, heat up the inside of the tree. And all of the liquid boils. And when it boils, it turns into steam. And steam takes up more space than liquid. So it goes from this to this, and the tree explodes. And you die because all the shrapnel hits you. So don't hide under trees. In fact, that's even more dangerous than putting an umbrella up. So what do? Well, you could go and hide in a car, because actually that's a pretty safe bet. You could just stay indoors that's even better. Although if you are, don't touch the light switches, because you can if you're doing, if the house is struck by lightning as you touch a light switch, you could be in trouble. The lightning could short circuit through you. But this is genuinely what they recommend in the States, where they have a lot more of these big lightning storms. What you need to do is bit of science, bit of biology. There are two electrical organs in Ukulele. The middle, and stick your bum in the air. Right over. That's it. Further. Come on, further. Further. Don't bend. Keep your legs straight. Just go as far down as you can. Come on, I can go that far. Is touch your hands on your legs. What you must do is cross your hands over your chest like this. Because now what happens is when the lightning strikes, it strikes the small Achilles back there. So it can either go that way or it can go that way. But if it goes that way, there's no path to the ground. So it goes this way and it goes backwards through her bottom, down her legs and out the soles of her feet. Kaylee suffers horrible burns, but the electricity doesn't go through her heart and it doesn't go through her head, so she survives. Round of applause for my volunteer, please. Yay! Thank you. So, yes, you can protect yourself, and it's all about protecting your vital organs. Because you can recover from a burn, but you can't recover if your brain is scrambled, so to speak. Okay, so we've got to the point now in the history of science where we're pretty sure we understand what electricity, silly things and pies and chickens and what have you. How then did we about just three things? And these are the three single inventions that I think are the most important in the history of electricity. And the first is these two chaps, or is discovered by these two chaps. This is Luigi Galvani and Alessandro Volta. Volta obviously gives his name to the volt, and Galvani, well, he doesn't. But what Galvani discovered, and this was the famous experiment you may have heard, where he was dissecting a frog. And he discovered that as he was dissecting the frog, he was cutting through one of the bits next to the muscle on the leg, and the frog's leg twitched. Okay, and it kind of just spasmed on its own, which was a bit freaky, and he probably ran screaming out of the room, "Oh, a zombie frog!" But when he came back, he thought, why is this happening? And it was actually Volta that worked out what was going on, because Galvani got his knickers all in a twist over what he called animal electricity. And what they discovered was that you can make electricity using chemistry. You don't need a static electricity machine. Now, I'm going to switch to my little camera here, and hopefully my computer's got enough juice to do this. So this is a device here, and I'm going to turn it on. This is a voltmeter, so this measures voltage, and at the moment it's measuring 0 volts. And that's because at the moment it's measuring the voltage between these two crocodile clips here. Well, there's a crocodile clip and a piece of copper wire, okay? And there's no discovered is that if you just take something like, well, an acid, a lemon here, just an ordinary lemon. If we take a lemon and we take like that, and this is a nail coated in zinc, it's galvanized. There's enough space, we can just about see that. Can you see this separated? Okay. Ooh, put it down. Separated by a bit of space. If I now attach my other crocodile clip to this, look what happens over here. We get 0.9 volts. So we get nearly 1 volt. Now, this battery here, okay, has 1.5 volts. That's how much voltage it can produce. This lemon is producing 0.9 volt. And in fact, the key here is it's down to the different types of metal, and it's the fact that it's two different types. I sit with this metal, and this is a piece of magnesium strip. Okay, so this is magnesium. Pop that in here, like that. If I attach now, I get nothing. There we go. I get 1.7 volts. I get nearly double the volts to have the world's first battery. And the key of doing nothing is just sitting there waiting to happen. There's a chemical reaction inside here that's sitting, waiting for us to attach a circuit to it. And as soon as we attach, the circuit runs out. So we have the potential to make electricity, which means I can take this and I can put it in my pocket and I can wander away. And when I need the chemistry, so I don't need a huge machine, I just need this battery. And until we have that, We couldn't progress from these huge machines. And the next thing that comes along, though, I'm going to take that out of the way, like that, comes to this man. We go away from Faraday. Sometime in 1821, Michael Faraday was in the basement here, just downstairs, and I looked at his notebooks just this afternoon with Frank James, the wonderful historian that does all the wonderful history here, and he showed me his notebooks, and in the corner at the bottom of his notebooks is a tiny little doodle, and the doodle is about that big. And what Faraday had discovered was that he was looking at, people had been messing around with magnetism, and they discovered that there was a connection between magnetism and electricity. And they weren't quite sure what to do with it, and they didn't quite understand it. But if I show you what Faraday came up with, he came up with this device. Now, you can see the original in the museum downstairs, which is just astonishing that the original of this is in the museum downstairs. It blows my mind. What he had was he had a Fray Bentos pie tin. He might not have had a Fray Bentos pie tin. I think it's actually a little glass bowl. His looked really good. Mine looks rubbish. And in the middle is a magnet. And this is key. There's a magnet here. This is a magnet. There's a Fray Bentos pie tin. And what we are going to do is we are going to take a big battery, although it's only 12 volts, so it's not kind of super duper. And I'm going to attach the battery here so that the electricity is going to go along this wire up here. So then going to go along this metal wire here. Okay, and it's going to go down this dangly metal wire, this dangly metal wire here, which is free to kind of bounce about. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put into this tray salt water. This is concentrated salt solution. Pour that in. And the reason I'm using that is because I need something that's conductive. Now, Faraday used mercury, but they get a bit twitchy if you take mercury out in public, because it's deeply poisonous. So, that's now full of salt water. So the circuit will now continue through the salt water, through the Fray Bentos pie dish, up this wire, and when I connect, it flings around and it begins to say, yes! And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the world's first electric motor. Faraday comes up with this through just sheer genius and demonstrates it in this very room to the public. And he shows it to people here in this room, on this table, here in front of an audience like you. And this, now it doesn't look much like an electric motor. I know, we think of electric motors, these great sort of lumps like this, and you put electricity to them. But that's because this is, it's a special type of motor, it's called a homopolar motor. But what it uses is it relies on the fact, the core, the kernel of the idea, that magnetism and electricity are interlinked. They're inextricably linked. And in fact, in some respects, they are the same thing. And you can't think of them as two separate things. You have to think of them as electromagnetic stuff. And when you get electricity, you get magnetism. When electricity flows through a wire, it turns the wire into a magnet. And because of that, the magnet that's at the bottom flings the wire around and it rotates. And with just a little bit of clever changes to the way things are set up, you can start to turn this into a motor that we would sort of recognize as a motor. And it's a really elegant little demonstration. You can make your own version. I'm going to unplug that because it's not working hugely well this afternoon. Here's a slightly different version, but it's essentially the same. What you do is you take a battery, here's one you can make at home, doesn't have to be as big as this. You put on the bottom of the battery one big magnet. These are neodymium magnets, these are rare earth magnets, so they're quite a little bit dear, but you can buy them in sort of Maplin and places like that. And then what you do is you take up a wire, and this wire is curled into a coil, okay? And you push that over the top. So that what's going to happen is the magnet is going to join the top of the battery to the bottom of the battery, where it got a bit squashed in my bag. Oh, it's quite sensitive. They need to be just tweaked so they're just balanced, and this is hopeless at the moment. But it just flings around like that, just like Faraday's homopolar motor. Oh, but you get the general idea, don't you? If something doesn't work, it's not science if it always works. So, Faraday comes up with the electric motor. Now, the electric motor, however, was not the first electrical device that really changed the world. The first electrical device that really changed the world was first demonstrated by this man. June in 1835, in Dundee at a public meeting, he demonstrated the world's first electric light bulb. A lot of people will tell you that Joseph Swan invents the light bulb. A lot of people will tell you that Edison invents the light bulb. They are all wrong, and they're wrong by at least 10 to 20 years, because this guy, James Bowman Lindsay, demonstrates a light bulb before any of them. He gets no credit, no one's ever heard of him, so I like to trumpet his name. This is what he did. He took a very thin fragment of carbon, and what I've got here is a jam jar, and in here, can you see that? Little, I hold it there, oops, there. See that little bit between the two metal prongs? There's a thin strip. That's actually a piece of, okay, from a propelling pencil. It's made of carbon, graphite, it's all squidged with wax, but essentially we have a piece of carbon there, I'm flailing all over the place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pass electricity through it, because I've attached that through this wire here, okay? I'm going to attach that to my, I'll grant you, but place it inside here to make a light bulb. And the key thing about a light bulb, though, and this was the key thing that Bowman Lindsay discovered, is that the thing is, do you remember when we passed electricity through the wire? I said it got hot because of friction. This happens to a carbon filament, and if I just attach this directly to the battery, it will get very hot. But the trouble is, it will get so hot, it will glow red hot, and then it will react with the oxygen that's in the air, and it will turn into carbon dioxide, and it will disappear like that. So we will get a brief flash, and it will be gone. But if you then take a vacuum pump, we've all got one of these at home, haven't we? Vacuum vans. Yes. Does it ever see any use? No. Because is there a half bottle of wine? No. Anyway, vacuum pump, by the way, invented by Otto von Guericke. My hero. Anyway, we're going to pump the air out of the jam jar. So we're taking the oxygen out, or at least most of the oxygen, because I can't get it all out. This was the key to it, is to pump the air out from the jam jar. Okay? That should do it. I don't know why I look. It's not, oh, yes, I've got the oxygen out. Actually, I'm just checking to see whether I've broken the filament, which is normally what happens. Right. So, I'm going to put these on, because they're sort of steampunk. Which gives you a clue as to what may happen next. This doesn't, and I'm going to gently turn this over, and then when I attach it, give it a breath. There's a whole load of smoke. Oh. It's all the wax burning off, which is obviously the problem. If I had just pure carbon there, I wouldn't get that. But it's burning off. It's incredibly bright. Can you imagine how people would have reacted to this? It's astonishing when you consider that all people had... Oh, it's gone. Oh, no, it's back. No, it's gone. It does get incredibly hot, and it's actually what's happened is it's burnt through. Even though there's not much oxygen there, but there's enough for it to burn away. But it's astonishingly bright. Imagine you're sitting there, you're used to candlelight and things like that, and gas lamps and complications like this. Suddenly somebody comes along and says, look, you can take a battery, which we can make, and you can just stick it in the corner, and you can attach it to one of these things that I've built here, and Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt, light, whenever you want it. Flick of a switch, the battery thing, but when you need the light, it's there for you. It revolutionized the world, this invention. This is the beginnings, in many respects, of the electrical revolution. All the other devices sort of build up to it, and it's that really, I believe, that revolutionized it. So there you go. We have tamed lightning. Yeah, it's all done. Oh, very quiet. Can you turn that up a bit? We like a bit of lightning sounds. We've gone from cats and static electricity. We've taken the cats and we've gotten rid of the fur, and we've made static electricity machines, and we can do all sorts of parlor tricks with it, and we can mess about and we can do fun things like that. But ultimately, it all comes down to making it into a practical purpose. We've got your batteries. We can take electricity, we can store it and carry it around in our hands as chemical energy, so to speak, and use it when we want. We've got motors, we've got lights. That's it. We've tamed, yes? So have we tamed electricity? Yes. Is what I'm going to say. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure because, and this is slightly scary. This is actually the scariest part of the whole talk, I think. Let me tell you about something. Let me tell you about this. This is Mr. Sun. Or is it Mrs. Sun? I don't know. Maybe it's Mrs. Sun. Let's call it Mrs. Sun today. This is Mrs. Sun, or Miss Sun, or Ms. Sun, we don't know. And that is a solar flare spewing out of the sun, okay? Speck of flight does. It spews out what's known as a coronal. When the coronal mass ejection comes off, now imagine this is the sun into space, and it's harmless. But every now and then a coronal crosses the intervening space, and when it does, so reliant on electricity. Before the electrical sort of revolution, these things happened. They went unnoticed. Now, when you get a coronal mass ejection hitting the Earth, it's a problem because what happens is all of the around us, here and in the ground and in the air and sort of all over the place, they pick up the charged particles as they're spewing through them. Now, the first coronal mass ejection that we observed, ironically, was one of the biggest. It was called the Carrington event. And when it happened, the only electrical devices were what they're called Wheatstone telegraphs. You know, when this happened, all the Wheatstone telegraphs, they're all going bonkers, and they were starting to see ghosts in the machine with the operator's hands. And if one of these things hits us these days, it knocks out the electricity because the power stations can explode, right? If it's a big enough one, it will completely from this. So that if we have a CME hit, say, London, for example, you might get the electric back for 2 whole days. You certainly couldn't be standing here in the dark without lights. You certainly wouldn't be using your telephones because even if they survive with battery power, because they might go, no Facebook, no Twitter, none of that. Worse, your freezer will stop working, which means you will have to eat all of the ice cream. So maybe it's not so bad. So I'm not so sure we've tamed electricity. I think electricity has still got a few surprises for us. We still don't know what to do. Lightning still is a most phenomenal, the most awesome, with a force with the most awesomosity. So, I gave you, the talk was called Zap, Crackle and Pop, and I've given you the zap, hopefully. I've given you a little bit of crackle, and now I want to give you the pop. So the pop is this. This is my homage to the early electricians, the electrical experimenters. This is my homage. Now, one of the things they were particularly fond of, setting fire, what they used to do is they used to like to set fire to brandy glasses. So they would pass around the brandy at the end of the soiree, and they would just set fire to the brandy. But I'm going to set fire to something else. I'm going to set fire to some hydrogen. Hydrogen is a highly, highly flammable gas, and this is a balloon full of hydrogen. So in here, we have hydrogen, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this to here, like that. I'm going to stand that there like that. Now, there's a few things I have to remember to do before I do this experiment. The first thing I have to remember to do is to put on appropriate PPE, as it's known, protective equipment. I won't put them on yet because I can't hear anything. So, I'll do that because that looks silly. Personal protective equipment. So, that's the first thing I have to remember to do. The second thing I have to remember to do is... No, can't remember. I know what it is. I need to put some oxygen in here. Because remember I said you need oxygen to burn things. In there is pure hydrogen. So in fact, this is, whilst it's flammable, it's not going to burn because there's no oxygen in it. So, we're going to put some oxygen in here so the hydrogen has something to use my own body to pass the electricity through me at great personal pain, I should point out. And I will touch this and the spark will appear. It will jump through a little, and well, hopefully it should make a little bit of a pop. Hopefully. So, a bit of oxygen first, like this. Hold on. Open that, and then oxygen going in. Now, in theory, we need 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. Because, of course, when hydrogen burns, it creates dihydrogen oxygen. of H2O. So you need 2 hydrogens for every oxygen, and I'm filling again. That should do it. Turn that off. Unplug this. Like that. Put that over here out of harm's way. Okay, so we've done that. Oh, and the next thing I have to remind you to do is that when I ignite this, you may want to put your hands over your ears. Not yet. So put your hands over your ears. So this is the end of the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've had fun coming to the Royal Institution. It is a mecca for science communicators like me. It is an astonishing place to come and visit, and it's a great privilege to stand here and to be able to talk to you guys about this. And in fact, when I was down in the archives earlier on, there was like boxes full of lecture notes about the history of electricity given by all the greats. So it's quite daunting being here. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. This is the deal. If it goes off, you all burst into a round of rapturous and totally spontaneous applause. And we all can go home with a warm, fuzzy feeling. Okay? So, are you ready? I'm going to climb on here, like that. Okay, let me just have a think. I'm going to put my hand on there, and I'm going to touch that on there, and we'll see what happens. Are you ready? Can't hear a thing. Here we go. Hands over ears, please. Charging up. Oh, it's going to go. Oh, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Fascinated astronomers and can leave us in awe. Some even said naming a star after a loved one as the ultimate romantic gesture. But what if that star is Betelgeuse? Betelgeuse, the bright star. Imagine you're on a date and your companion decides to impress you with their astronomy knowledge. It's been and Ptolemy observed Betelgeuse, but it was a different color and behaved differently. Betelgeuse's remarkable changes evolved significantly over time. Its speed has than our sun. One polar. Betelgeuse's latest antics recently. Betelgeuse has been It started winking at us and even hid behind dust. Explosion. We're talking about the neck could offer a unique opportunity for 5,000 light years away. Betelgeuse is only 20 times the distance, making it an extraordinary spectacle for astronomers. Potential impact on us. Let's not forget that we've miscalculated things in the past. It's different. The climate and ozone layer effects a supernova could have unforeseen combined with ongoing global warming. Moreover, the explosion damage the ozone layer, which shields us from harm. Conclusion.